तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Right. Hari Om and good morning to all. The topic for the day is work-life harmony. I'm sure when we were starting the class in sometime last year, we had said this in the very beginning, but we thought since many are joining from outside Calcutta, we will take this session, which is a very fundamental session for science of self-management. Before we get into the topic, I will just play a 5 minutes video on what is known as four burners theory. First, we will watch it and then we'll continue with our class.
Let's talk about a balanced life. In our modern society, we want to do it all. We want to be great at the work we do, we want to be healthy, we want to have great friends, all while being the best spouse and the best parent we can be. This is something many people want, but rarely anyone achieves it. But why is it so hard to achieve all those things? Well, it's because a balanced life is an illusion. One way to look at life balance is through a concept known as the four burners theory. Imagine there's an old cooking stove in your kitchen. This stove has four burners. Each burner symbolizes one major quadrant of your life. The first burner represents your family. The second burner is your friends. The third burner is your health. The fourth burner is your work. However, there's only a limited amount of power the stove has to use for each of the burners. This means if all four burners are at the same power, none of them are burning strongly. Instead, they're burning at about 25% capacity each. And if you want to turn up one of the burners, the other three will lose some of their power. Essentially, if you want one burner to burn to its full potential, you would have to turn off the other three. Now, the premise of the four burners theory is this. In order to be successful, you have to cut off one of your burners. And in order to be really successful, you have to cut off two. I know the term success is relative and that it means different things to different people. But whenever you look closely at someone you consider successful, you'll find that they live a highly imbalanced life. There's usually one area that is dominating their life while other areas are left hanging by the side. For example, CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, Elon Musk, has stated during interviews that he works at least 100 hours every week. Talk about imbalance. He's fueling all his time and energy into his most important burner, which is work. That also means that he doesn't have much time and energy left to spend on other burners like health, family, or friends. The truth is that life is filled with trade-offs. If you want to excel at your work and in your marriage, then your friends and your health may have to suffer. If you want to be healthy and succeed as a parent, then you might be forced to dial back on your career. However, I don't agree that we should turn off a quadrant completely. Instead, we should let it burn on a lower setting. Of course, you're free to divide your time equally among all the areas and live a quote-unquote balanced life. But you have to accept that you're unlikely to achieve major success in any given area. The four burners theory reveals something that everyone must deal with. Every choice has a cost. And I know that nobody likes hearing this, but sadly there are limits to our time and energy. If you're spending 5 hours per week hanging out with your friends, that's 5 hours you could have spent exercising, or 5 hours you could have been working on your business. By doing one thing, you're taking away from another. That's simply how life is. If you want to excel at any given area, you must become imbalanced and sacrifice other regions. Essentially, you're forced to choose. Do you want to live a life that is balanced but never maximize your potential in a given quadrant? Or would you rather live a life that is imbalanced? That means underperforming in some areas but succeeding in a certain region. This is something everyone should think about. Now, the four burners theory might only list 4 regions, but you could easily add other areas as well, such as studying, different hobbies, and even cleaning. Nevertheless, the principle stays the same. If you're hanging out with your friends, you're not studying. And if you're working on your business, you're not cleaning or practicing the piano. Now, while it may be true that we'll always have to make trade-offs, nowhere does it say we have to stick with the same trade-offs forever. Burners usually change in importance as we grow older. When you're a kid, life is all family and friends. Then as you enter school, usually friends and studying take over. When you're in your 20s or 30s and you don't have children, the health and work burners are on full blast. A few years later, you might start a family and suddenly the work burner dips down, while your family burner gets more gas. Another decade passes and you might revive relationships with old friends or pursue that business idea you had been putting off. Essentially, as your life progresses, your priorities change and therefore your burners will burn differently. For this reason, I believe there's no point in chasing a perfect life balance as it's unlikely we'll ever achieve it. Rather, we should aim for life satisfaction. If you know spending more time with your friends and family is going to bring you more joy, by all means, spend more time with them. If work and career are more important to you, then spend more time and energy there. Each one of us has different priorities and we're all in different stages of life. It's okay to be imbalanced as long as you're happy with the trade-offs you're making. So do whatever is more important to you and live the life you want to live. The four burners theory is a reminder that each choice has a cost. For one burner to burn stronger, the others have to lose some of their power.
Right. So this is a very interesting four burners theory. You can search for it in YouTube also. You will find that. Now, I'm neither rejecting it nor endorsing it, but we need to look at work-life balance from a deeper perspective. And what you have said is not wrong. It is there. In other words, there is a trade-off. At every stage in life, we can give priority to a particular area, and therefore the other area has to suffer to that extent. This is what we have been experiencing also. And then what we must understand is that we are not a particular personality with a particular visiting card which says that you are working in such and such office only. We are a composite personality playing different roles at the same time. How do we balance various roles is the question. Now, before we begin that, just I'll share a screen. I'm coming back to the slideshow here. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself. Is my life balanced between office and home? Am I able to concentrate on my work at office? At home, am I able to spend quality time with my family? Overall, am I really happy and satisfied with my progress? Because I was connecting this to success. We said there are two aspects of success. And the gentleman in that video also was talking about what you define as success. One is what you achieve externally. Another is what you feel internally happiness about it. So both these things must be there for you to call yourself successful. From your point of view, others may consider you successful or not successful. That is not the main thing. Main thing is how do you consider yourself? What are the measuring points? So overall, you must be able to say, are you satisfied with your progress? Are you happy? We tend to take the office problems or office work to home. There we are not able to spend quality time with the children. We are taking home issues to the office where you are not able to fully concentrate in the office. That is where the imbalance creates. Okay, even as you say that this is the time I need to allot here, this is the time I need to allot here. Having allotted, are you able to fully be there? Is that fully under your control? That is the question. One day, let's say there's an important meeting in the office. That day morning, there was some problem in the house. Maybe there was an issue that some quarrel with family members or water didn't come and there was a lot of hullabaloo in the house. So many things. With that, for that important meeting, you have come to the office somehow. But is your mind available for the office? Are you able to switch off completely what has happened in the house and just focus on the job at hand? Though you know that is the right thing, how many of us, for us, it is possible to do it automatically? This is where the intellect comes in, right? Other questions that you need to again check for yourself is, in general, I'm talking, this is nothing to do with this specific topic, but you answer for yourself these things. Have I fairly accomplished my duties and responsibilities so far? First of all, we live most of our life based on duties and responsibilities only. At least still, Indian way of life and Eastern way of living is revolving around duties, not against rights. It is not wife's right against the husband, or husband's right against the wife, children's right, animal right, citizens' right. It's not right. It is about duty. Husband's duty to wife, wife's duty to husband, children's duty to parents, teachers' duty to students, students' duty to teachers. So any society that lives on duties and responsibility is going to definitely thrive. So that feeling is still there. But the point is, what is my duty? What is my responsibility? Am I clear with that? See, a person asked very genuinely, he met somebody at his friend's party or something, they exchanged cards and they become friends, or his own distant relative was there. He has a meeting one day in office, but that same friend whose cousin or somebody who is not directly connected, and he has very genuinely invited him for the wedding. Is it my duty to go? That is his question. Yes, he likes to go to the wedding. There is also his obligation to attend to the meeting, but attending wedding not just from the point of view of enjoying the party there, from the point of view of duty. Should I go there? So we are not even sure of what is my duty, at least, but what we think is duty. See, suppose the mother thinks that whole, we know in Bengal, particularly Calcutta, when the student undergoes an examination in the school, the entire house is in a tension, particularly the mother is in great tension. And she feels, and in the process, maybe that day nobody has a breakfast, you look outside because she has to focus on the children's exams or something like that. In the name of duty, what is happening here? There is lot more pressure put on the child, lot more pressure put on the family members, and in the process, it may even hamper his studies also. But everything is done in the name of love, in the name of duty only. So, is it really your duty? How will you analyze? How will you come to a conclusion? Only then you will know. Till today, yes, sir, I have educated my children, I have got my children married, or I have provided with the basic facilities to my family. All that is fine. Yes, as a householder, it is. But is that all your duty confined to? No, I vote in the election. That is a duty as a citizen. Okay. Then your citizen duty is over. I pay my taxes. As a citizen, your duty is over then. So, have you got an understanding as to what a duty is and what is the meaning of a duty? Sir, I'm just giving a thought for you to think about. We are not going into this discussion now. Remember, a terrorist who is blowing off his life, killing innocent people in the name of religion, thinks that he is doing his duty. Remember this. He is doing his very sacred and holy duty is what he thinks. I am not comparing our life with a terrorist life. No. But similarly, we also do everything and we feel that this is my duty. On what basis? I am saying it may be correct also, it may be wrong also, but have we analyzed? Have I fairly accomplished my duties and responsibilities so far? Is there a goal that I visualize for my life? Various so-called goals that we call for ourselves in life are nothing but milestones that are set for us by our family and predecessors. At this stage, you have to earn money. At this stage, you have to get married. At this stage, you produce children. At this stage, you go into this, whatever it is. All this, you cannot call these as goals. These things that are happening at various stages of life, even some stages are there in animals also. They also undergo that mechanically. It is just you don't consciously do it. But goal is something that you visualize and say, is this what my purpose of life is? It can be anything in the world, even business. Even, I'm not saying anything wrong about making money or business or whatever it is, but have you visualized something as a purpose in life? And since most of us are working in an organization, in this case, let's say Rahi or any other organization for that matter, is my goal, or if I have something, is it linked or is it in line with my organizational objectives also? Is there a contradiction? Am I just mechanically doing the duties in the office just because I need to do it? Or yes, I am feeling inspired because my whatever I want to achieve, whatever the company also wants to achieve are going more or less, they are in the same line. I am able to feel satisfied about that and work happily in the organization. That question you ask yourself. Lastly, again, do I need to get into something known as spiritual pursuit at all? Is there something called spirituality? Is there something called God? Is it my duty now to look into it, or should I wait till retirement? Or is there first of all a need for that at all? So these are the questions that you need to understand to evaluate and come to a conclusion as to what is the purpose of your life. As I said first, is there a purpose for life? If there is a purpose for life, what is that purpose? Right. In this background, we have to understand work-life balance or work-life harmony. Sir, all of us are managers, meaning you manage something. If I ask who are you, you will give your visiting card which says you are a production manager or finance manager or a managing director or a general manager or even a supervisor. He is managing something. Okay. But is that all to you? There are three components of management. One is the manager, who is the individual, who is you, who is the subject. Then there is somebody known as managed. That managed is what you manage. It is the object. You may manage material, you may manage machinery, you may manage finance, you may manage other people, you may manage computer, you may manage accounts, whatever. All that you manage is B. C is the management function. C is the coming together of A and B. When A and B come together, it is called as management. All over the world, there is a lot of emphasis on improving B and C. That is, what you manage is getting constantly improved, and the management function is also improved in the sense you are given enough education for that. Let us say for example, the type of technology that was there 20 years back, 40 years back, and now there is a lot of improvement. Therefore, the machinery is improved. The finance sources are improved. The way in which you will get loan, etc., that is improved. Software is improved. Accounting tendency, methods are improved. So what you manage is getting improved. Similarly, the management function, that means the technical knowledge that is required for managing your particular area, that is also constantly being looked into. See, GST was there. GST tax was implemented few years ago. That's a new thing. So if you call a taxation expert who has understood it, and he gives a lecture or a seminar to your taxation team, to your accounting team, then you will know how to manage the taxation better. Tally software is there. They have released the latest version, let us say. If a person from Tally comes and tells you how to do this, then your management of accounting improves. Zoom is there. We are doing class through that, and Zoom has improved some technology, added some features. You go to Zoom and they are teaching you something. Your management of this particular app, which is called Zoom, that will improve. So what is being improved all the time is B and C. Managed and the management are improved. But what is neglected? And what is neglected to a point of fault is the manager. Who is this manager? Who manages the manager? Who is this individual? This is where work-life balance comes. We are taught in management schools, we are taught everywhere to manage everything outside us, about us, outside us. But we are not taught to manage oneself. And remember, a person who is not able to manage himself properly he will not be able to manage anything outside him successfully. Yes, for a time being, you will achieve success in certain areas as he had shown in different facets of life. But overall, you will not have a satisfaction and work-life balance, which will directly tell upon your mental and physical health if we don't have the basic amount of self-management that we need to practice. So we are just deviating and going into the same aspect from overall life point of view. It happens in the same way in life. As I said, success is measured with reference to your overall happiness also. Your overall happiness is included in your success. So each and everything that we do in life is to enhance this happiness. But what we see is, with constant improvement of the world, we are not able to derive that much happiness as we are supposed to derive. See, suppose what was world 20 years back and now, even in our own generation, we know our life cannot be now happening without laptop and mobile phone. But we were living life, even in our generation, I'm saying 25, 30 years back, without a mobile phone. You go to your grandfather or their grandfather's generation, there was probably not even electricity at that point of time. And they will say their life was so peaceful, so nice. And next that electricity came and the fan was there, only one fan was there in the room or the house, and everybody used to be somewhat okay, and they were adjusting their life. Yet they said that life was very good. Next generation came, there was various other technology and amenities, and there were, you went to a theater and saw movies. Then next generation came where you saw black and white television. Once in a while you saw a movie or Chitrahar or whatever it is. Color television and satellite television came where you can watch cricket match. So we see that there is a constant improvement of the world even as you go 3-4 generations back. But what is interesting is, each and every generation says the previous generation was happier. I used to hear radio commentary over West Indies and India match, and that was the thing. Now cricket is there all the time. I am not able to really enjoy. This is what this generation says. Like that, it could go from generation to generation, and this improvement is not happening only in the last 50 years or 100 years. This improvement of the world has been happening right from day one. Invention of plough was a great invention where people can settle in a place and do agriculture. Then much later came industrial revolution. Much later came computer revolution. All these things are beautifully improving the world. Technology, amenities, these must be improved. If you don't go along with the world and improvement in technology, you will be left behind. You must improve. But the question is, with all these amenities and facilities that are there at press button comfort for us now, has the happiness quotient increased? The sad answer is not that much, as it should be. As much as, I'm not saying everybody is sad and morose and dejected, but I'm saying as much happiness as we should feel like a child, we are not feeling it. So one set of thinkers, and this is not a new phenomenon, this is an age-old phenomenon. One set of thinkers thought about this. Why is it that man, with all the improvement of the world also, is not able to be as happy as he should be? So then they went into a laboratory to do this research and experiments. That laboratory was the Himalayan jungles, and these scientists were called as rishis. The subject matter of the study was human being only. And then they came to certain startling conclusions as to what life is all about and why is this phenomenon, a contradiction happening. They understood, first of all, what is life. Sir, we are all called living beings because we are doing some activities. There is motion, there is energy. With all these things, what we are doing is that we are into experiencing the world. We are having experience. Now we have an experience in a classroom across internet. Next, you will have experience in your office or meeting or somewhere, you will have that experience. Next, you will have a lunch experience. Next, you will have maybe a nap or maybe some meeting, maybe something, some other experience. You have then walking in the evening. Then you go home and watch a movie. Then you have dinner. Then you sleep. All these are experiences. All these experiences are continuous flow of experiences. One thing flows into the other. Therefore, they understood that unit of life is an experience. So, life's definition is Anubhava Dhara. Learn this term today. Life is called as Anubhava Dhara. Anubhava means experience. Dhara means flow. If the experiences stop, you stop. Your life stops. You are dead. A dead body or a non-living being does not have experience. You have experience, I have experience. Everybody has experience. So experience is the unit of life. So the first question they took was, what is life? And they came to the conclusion that life is a flow of experience. The next logical question is, what is experience? Experience is coming together of two things which we discussed in the previous slide. Experience is coming together of subject and object. So there are two components of experience. One is subject, another is object. Subject is you, the individual, the experiencer. Object is the world that you experience. So it is called as the experienced. So when these two come together, it is called as experience. So experience has to necessarily make both these things come together, subject and object. Then they further went on to see, what is this world made up of? What is this object made up of? This world is generally made up of course, various components are there, but broadly they can be classified under. It is made up of wealth. World is made up of various people. World is made up of various aspects of nature, which could be elements, which could be plants, which could be nature, whatever it is. Various animals and various things are there. All this put together is called as world. And what they saw was, people were working in different fields, scientifically, worked on it properly, and they kept on improving the world. Economists are those who improve the wealth of the world. Politicians work with the system of how to govern people and system of society that they were, when we say politician, don't think of what we understand as modern politicians. Politicians means a set of people who were looking at managing people as a group. So they worked on various systems. Like for example, whether democracy will work or something else will work, all those things, by which society and that system they improve. Scientists, chemists, botanists, biology, zoology, various things that they studied, and they improved the nature, improved how it can be modified further, like that it is. So what these rishis found out was, world has been constantly beautifully improved by these set of people and various other people. So, and it has been wonderfully improved. But what is neglected? What is neglected to a point of fault is the individual. So for experience to improve, for experience to enhance, say you say that I want to improve my life. I want to improve my life means that is a general statement. Everybody wants to improve life. So specifically then what you must improve? Say sir, if you find that in your office or house a particular wall is leaking and you call that engineer or architect to see what is wrong, and he finds out that the wall, there has been a lot of crack and through which water will come, whatever it is. So he says this particular portion you have to demolish and rebuild. Okay, you have to demolish this and rebuild. So because it is not of good quality. So if you want to rebuild a wall, good quality of wall you can say, that is a general statement. But specifically then what you must concentrate on? You must concentrate on every brick of the wall. So if wall is a general thing, then brick is the specific thing. Brick is the unit of the wall. Similarly, Experience is the unit of life. If you say I have to improve life, then obviously you have to concentrate on every unit of life, which is experience. If you want to then improve experience, then the next question arises, what is experience? When we say subject and object has to come together to make an experience, you have to improve both the subject and the object. The rishis found out that we have been working only towards improving the object, which is the world. We have not attended to the subject. Therefore, there is a mismatch. One is improved very high, one is not touched down upon, then there is an imbalance. Then you are not able to fulfill your experiences in a satisfactory manner. So, like you study the world and improve the world, they said you have to study the individual and improve the individual. The study of the individual is called as subjective science. All other sciences are objective science because they deal with the object. This science studies with the subject, therefore it's subjective science. Subjective science is technically called as Vedanta. So you can use the word science, subjective science or Vedanta, both are same, or self-management you can use. But the point is this, unless otherwise you deal with yourself, improve yourself, you will not be able to deal with the world in a proper way. Sir, if you want to improve your health, suppose a person is feeling very weak, he wants to improve his health, he goes to the doctor checks and says that his food habits are not proper, he has to improve the quality of the food. He prescribes various food, high calorie food, high protein food, whatever he is prescribing. He has the resources also, so then he fills up the dining table with best of fruits, nuts and whatever he wants to eat. But carefully analyze, from health point of view, is that alone enough? No. For you to eat the food, for you to consume the food, you must have appetite also. Appetite means hunger must be there. If hunger is not there, how will you eat? Therefore, you have to improve the food from outside. You have to improve the hunger from inside. You have to improve the appetite from inside. You have to do exercises, or you do yogasana, or you do kapalabhati. All those things are also a must. So you improve the individual. That is, in the case of this example, for health, you improve the individual's appetite. You improve the food, then automatically the health will improve. Exactly like that. For your life to improve, your appetite for life must increase. Do you have a hunger for life? Sir, today is Friday. I ask this question. You answer for yourself. Do you look forward to Friday evenings or do you look forward to Monday mornings? This is what we need to analyze. Don't tell me, you answer yourself. We know in America and other places there are restaurants, chain of restaurants called TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. Nothing wrong in enjoying a weekend or a Friday. But what is your attitude when you go to office in the Monday morning? That is what counts. Do you look forward to Monday morning or Friday evening? A person who is able to enjoy his work right from Monday morning is able to enjoy the weekend also. A person who is able to enjoy his work throughout his year is able to enjoy the vacation also. So taking a vacation is not wrong. Enjoying a weekend is not bad, not wrong. But your work must not pressurize you so much that you look forward to weekend, that you look forward to vacation. That person, for him, you can say maximum it is a relief, it is not an enjoyment. The quality of the food in your house must not be so bad that you look forward to go to restaurant daily. Once in a while, you go to a restaurant and have a different food, Chinese food or Italian food, that is okay. But the quality of the food in the house is so bad that you look forward to going to restaurant daily, then there's something wrong. Exactly like that. You must look forward to life. You ask even an old person, if he answers, that is not acceptable. But when youngsters say, how is life? And you say, chalta hai and cholche and various things like that, it only talks about their attitude of not wanting to meet life with that enthusiasm. The same enthusiasm which you had in the beginning of the life, why does it wean away? So that is where we need to understand, in order to keep that appetite of life, we need to work upon our inner personality. So coming back here, the question was, what is life? Life is flow of experience. What is experience? It is coming together of subject and object. The next obvious question is, what is subject? So we need to understand the basic human composition here. As an individual, if we want to understand ourselves, who is the individual? Suppose if I ask, who are you? The most common answer that we get is that I am so and so, which is correct. I am Mukherjee, I am Banerjee, or here I see some names. I am Shivaram, or I am Sarfraz. Sarfraz or Shivaram is a name. I am asking, who are you? Yes, you say this name is what identifies me. So my question is, what is your identity? You can say identity, you can say individuality, you can say personality, you can say various names. All that finally also boils down to what is it that you are referring to. So we need to understand that basically we are referring to our body. Basically we are referring to our body, which is our outer personality. See, suppose if there's a Chatterjee, somebody calls himself as Chatterjee. If many people are walking out of the room and I call only Chatterjee, who turns back? He only turns back. And what in him turns back? The body turns back. So you are essentially your body. But it is just not the body, because even dead body has a body. Dead body but doesn't have any respect. It doesn't have any life. It doesn't have any experience. You are having experience and you say, this is me, this is me. Like that you are proudly saying, because inside your body something is sitting. That something is called as your mind and intellect. That is called as your inner personality. Inner personality is the theme of self-management. Inner personality is what we need to learn about in Vedanta. Body, physical exercises, health, that we have also dealt a little bit before, but that nobody needs to teach you. You know it. Basic understanding of body is there. But what is not taught to us in schools or colleges or even in our family or homes is that you are having two wonderful equipments called mind and intellect. Without understanding, we will not be able to use these equipments properly. Sir, when you go and purchase any gadget from the market, what do you get along with it? Okay, you get the bill, you get the warranty card, all that, you leave it. Apart from it, everything that you buy, whether it is a mixer grinder or a car or a calculator or mobile phone, whatever you buy, what comes along with it is a user's manual. We have this habit of not going through that user manual at all. And moment a washing machine comes, you just put it and plug and operate, and only when there's something wrong, then we try to consult that, or you ask the electrician or the technical person. But if you read the user's manual carefully, you will be able to operate that equipment properly, and you will elongate the life of the equipment. You will use it for a long time properly. So user's manual is very important. And car, when do you use? Maybe once a day, or now in lockdown period it is not being used at all. A calculator you may use once in 2 days. Television you can use maybe 1 hour in a day. A mixer or a grinder you can use in the kitchen once a week. All these things that you use are not constant. Once in a while you use this, but still user manual is important. Imagine the best and the most important equipment that you have is your mind and intellect, which you are using daily, which you are using constantly, which you are using from your birth to death, always. We don't seem to have studied the user's manual. Very sad. Without understanding the user's manual of mind and intellect, we will not be able to use the equipments properly. If we don't use it properly, it is going to not cooperate with us after a point. It will come to a grinding halt. Suddenly there will be a engine will cease. At that time it may be too late. Too late. So what is this knowledge essentially talking about? Whether it is Bhagavad Gita, whether it is Vedanta, whatever you want to call it, the knowledge essentially is talking about you. It is giving a user's manual for your life. Whether you are a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, all that thing here really doesn't matter. You are a human being, definitely. You are using the equipments. The forefathers of ours, whether they were in the caveman period, whatever it is, they also had their mind and intellect. 10, 20 generations later, 100 generations later also, the human being that is going to have, they will have their mind and intellect. The emotions that we have, the thoughts and the thinking capacity that we have, they will be there. So better understand how to use it properly. That is what is going to essentially help you to manage yourself. So to complete the picture here, body is the outer personality, mind and intellect is the inner personality. What you call as self. In Sanskrit, you can use the word Atma. You can use the term God principle. You can use any other term if you are comfortable with. Doesn't matter. That is called as the real personality. This real personality is something which is common for all, which is there for all. This is not a subject matter of our discussion here, because that we'll take it up separately. But what you need to understand is, there is something like electricity which is making everything happen within us. To take the example of a bulb, in the bulb, what you see as outside the tube for a tube light or the globe for a light, that is the outer personality. The filament which is there inside burning, that is the inner personality. The electricity which makes the bulb glow is the real personality. You take fan also, the wings and the other outer portion of the fan that you see is the outer personality. The motor inside the fan which is making it run, that is the inner personality, which you don't see. Electricity which passes through the fan is the real personality. Electricity is the same in the fan, in an air conditioner, in a tube light, in a mixer grinder or computer. Electricity is the same. So there's no discussion about electricity. But why is one bulb glowing very bright and another bulb very dull? It is because of the power or the wattage. That is to do with the filament. That has nothing to do with electricity. So therefore, we need to only study and concentrate on what is mind and intellect. So the question was, what is life? Life is a series of experiences, flow of experiences. Experience, then the next question is, what is experience? It is coming together of subject and object. Next question is, what is subject? The individual. The individual is made up of these three: body, mind and intellect, where body is the outer personality and mind and intellect is the inner personality. So the next logical question is, what is this inner personality? What is this mind and intellect? Sir, mind, see, we do the actions with the body. Okay? Your body does the actions. Body is that what meets every other person and it is doing the actions. But you will understand and appreciate that body cannot do actions by itself. If a body were to act by itself, then the dead body should act. That is not the case. Table has a physical body, this table here. Computer has a body, if you want to call it. Computer cannot act by itself. It cannot. You are now doing an action, coming and sitting and listening to whatever I am saying. I am doing an action, coming and speaking whatever I am speaking. My body cannot come and sit here by itself. Your body cannot come and listen by itself. There is something which is prompting the body to do. So therefore, the outer personality of the body is prompted by something within you. That is the inner personality. So what prompts you? What prompts you is either the mind or the intellect. What prompts you is either the mind or the intellect. What is mind? For mind, you can use these words in different contexts. One, you can say it is feelings, impulses, feelings, impulses, indecision. Sometimes you are thinking the mind is in a state, thoughts is in a state whether I should do or I should not do, whether I should be a vegetarian or non-vegetarian. You are in a very confused state, indecisive state. That state of mind is called, that state of thoughts is called as mind. In another way, you can say mind is full of likes and dislikes. I like Saurav Ganguly. I don't like Sachin Tendulkar. Why? You cannot ask why. That is my like. I like blue color. I don't like green color. That is my like. Everybody. I like chapati. I don't like puri. Why? That is my like. That is my dislike. So these aspects of the personality which gurgles by itself, comes out by itself, indiscriminate thoughts, this is called as mind. In another sense, it is called as emotions. You feel love. Automatically, there is something which comes up and you feel that in the bosom of your personality. You feel anger, positive or negative. You feel love, you feel anger, you feel happiness, you feel jealousy, you feel gratitude, you feel bhakti. All these are emotions. I am not confining to this. There are thousands of emotions like this. Many, many emotions. Since we are on the point of emotions, remember this. Animals have emotions. Human beings have emotions. Animals have emotions. Plants don't have emotions. Okay? Plants don't have emotions. 1 minute. I'll just check if I have that chart. You see this? We have talked about body, mind and intellect. A plant has a body. Plant doesn't have a mind. Plant doesn't have an intellect. I think we studied this chart, if I'm not mistaken, a few weeks back. I don't know if it is in this class or some other class I did. Plant has a body. Plant doesn't have a mind. Plant doesn't have an intellect. Mind means plant doesn't have emotions. Okay. If you go into the very deep technical details of it, they do experiment and they have found out if plants reacts to music or emotions, very, 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 very minimal, as good as zero. So plant for all practical purposes does not have emotions, mind. Animal on the other hand has a body, much more developed body than the plant. Animal has emotions. Animal can feel all the emotions that you have. Animal shows love, feels love, hatred, jealousy. You know, that's why we say, see Animal Planet or Discovery Channel, you will find a lot of lessons in that. Almost all the emotions that we have, animals also has. See, what we have is, we have depth in every emotion. Meaning there is a possibility of depth in every emotion. But we cannot deny animals have emotions. When you see anger in animals, you see crying in animals, you see sadness, you see depression, all these things are there. But I'm asking you one question. Okay, here you may not be able to answer, but think about it. There is one emotion that is peculiar and specific for a human being. We are not talking about intellect here, we are not talking about thinking here, but there is one emotion that is very, very unique and peculiar for a human being. What is it? It is laughter. Ability to crack a joke with a light-hearted mind when you laugh, that capacity animals don't have. See, sometimes animals open the mouth and do something or they express the joy. That is not laughter. You go back to your own childhood. A pencil fell off the table and you and your friend were uncontrollably laughing because of that. The teacher or the parent gets irritated. Hey, why are you giggling all the time? Why are you laughing all the time? That's what they say. Why are they saying it? You know, the psychologists, they are not able to laugh. The adult is not able to laugh. As a child, you were full of laughter, fun, all those things were there. When we grew into an adult, where did all the laughter go? Even now we are laughing, but we are not as light-hearted as a child. We need to create special jokes or see a cartoon or something that we need for us to create that laughter. There is a lesson for you that nature says that if you want to live to the dignity and prestige of a human being, keep that laughter going. That is spirituality. By laughter, I am not talking about expression of laughter, ha ha ha, like this laughing. It is that inner feeling of mirth and joy that will express itself as laughter. So particularly I am saying, those who want to improve themselves and they associate with spiritual organizations and religious teachers in various forms. It is these spiritual people and spiritual organizations that make the life even more serious. I am not saying that you must not have any understanding of serious things in life, but life is not meant to be very serious and very tight and very, very heavy hearted. Particularly, you will find that that is what Swamiji says is the difference between a philosopher and a philosophy teacher. A philosophy teacher is one who will probably have a very hoarse voice. He will have all books around him. He will have a thick glass. He is very serious. You can never have a laughter on his face. And he will also make you very serious in life. On the other hand, philosopher is one who has digested the philosophy and he has become light. Always the life of Lord Krishna comes into our mind. He is a philosopher. Wherever he went, there was joy, there was mirth, there was laughter. That is life. So you should not be merely philosophy teachers. You must be philosopher is one who has imbibed this and who can laugh. Because only when you laugh, when you have that happiness within, you can spread that happiness outside. If you have depression, if you have pressure in your mind, stress, that is what you will spread outside. Swami Ramtirtha says, the greatest help, that service that you can do to the world is, if you have depression, don't come out of your room. Don't come out of your room. Because you will spread the disease outside. If you have chicken pox, like now somebody has COVID, this coronavirus has infected him. What is the best service he can do? He has to quarantine himself. He has to quarantine himself so that he doesn't spread the disease to others. Like that, at the mental level, you must not have that stressful feeling. That is your first obligation in life. Your only obligation in life is to be happy. And that when you have, only then you can pass on happiness to others. So coming back here, yeah, we were talking about this inner personality. Mind is full of these emotions. So if you see the structure of an animal and the structure of a human being, you will find that animal by and large grows horizontally. The head and heart are in the same line for an animal. For a human being, head is above heart, like this. So nature again gives us a lesson that if you want to live to the dignity and prestige of a human being, your head must rule the heart. Your head must control the heart. Remember, emotions you must have. If you don't have emotions, we are plants, we are stones. But you must not become emotional. Your decisions and actions should not be guided by emotions. And who can help you with that? Your own intellect. So body's actions can be directed by the intellect. What is intellect? Intellect is the capacity to reason. Intellect is the capacity to judge, decide. So you, after analysis, you come to a firm conclusion or decision. Discrimination. Discrimination is to say this is A, this is B. This is dharma, this is adharma. This is what I should do, this is what I should not do. Something in you tells you. Analysis, judgment, reason, logic, all this is the aspect of your intellect. And all of us have intellect. All humans have intellect. Animals don't have intellect. Animals don't have choice in life. You have a choice in life. I am not talking about major choices in life like whether you should get married or not, whether you should take a science group or a commerce group or a whatever group, or whether you should be a professional or a businessman, or you should work under somebody. These are major choices. Whether to settle in Calcutta or Bombay, that's a major choice, let's say. Whether to attend class today or not was a choice. Whether to eat rice or chapati today is a choice. Whether to whatever, wear a blue shirt or red shirt today is a choice. We are confronted with choice at every point of time. And on what basis do we choose? Most of us who are not aware that there is a faculty called intellect, we tend to choose along our emotions. And that is where disaster is. So emotions is good, but you must not base your decisions and thinking and choices based on emotions. It must be based on your intellect. If you compare mind to a river, river is a very useful commodity. River can give you drinking water. River can give you fish if somebody eats fish. River can provide space for navigation. River can produce hydroelectricity. It is very, very useful for human beings. That is why cities are built next to rivers. But if the same river breaks the banks and flood is there, the same river can cause damage. Damage to property, damage to crops, damage to lives. Lives will go. Disease will come. Cattle will die. Various things will happen. Same river. Same river is a boon if the river is flowing within the banks. Same river is a curse if it breaks the banks and goes outside. A river is your mind. Banks of the river is your intellect. If you have emotions, full flow of emotions is also there, fine. But it is under the control of the intellect. You can direct that in mind and do wonderful things. But unfortunately, the mind goes by itself, breaks the banks, and that causes all the problem. So, self-management is all about controlling your mind with intellect. Again, I am saying, don't suppress your emotions. Don't frustrate your personality by suppressing your emotions, but you must channelize your emotions. You must give a feeling the went in the proper direction. As I say, any work is done with a basic passion. Basic emotion must be there. But when it comes to decision making, see, this is what happened to Arjuna. Arjuna was a clear-headed person. He was waiting for the war. Okay? At the 0 hour of the battle, what happened was, his intellect, instead of clearly seeing who is the army people, who are the warriors in the enemy camp and in his own camp, he began to see my grandfather, my uncle, my cousin, my brother, my guru, my nephew. All these things came, my, and so much he got caught up in emotions. Once he got caught in emotions, his bow dropped and he could not act. Exactly same thing happens to all of us. We are all heroes when the challenges of others, but when the challenge confronts us, we are not able to handle ourselves because it's basically emotions. If you are able to control your emotions with the intellect, then you are able to practice what is known as self-management. If you are able to manage yourself only, then there will be work-life balance. So work-life balance is hinging on the development of intellect, strength of intellect. Now, what is this intellect and how it is different from intelligence is what we saw maybe a couple of weeks back, if you recall. Intellect is not intelligence. Intelligence is what you gain through external source. You are intelligent in marketing, you are intelligent in production, you are intelligent in agriculture or whichever field. Being well informed in one or more subjects is intelligence that you can acquire. But that does not guarantee peace of mind because that does not automatically control your mind. Controlling mind is strengthening of the intellect which has to come from within. So the essence of self-management is nothing but intellect controlling your mind. Therefore, development of intellect is the utmost importance of life. Not just important, necessity. Simultaneously, as you pursue intelligence, pursue your career, pursue your family life, everything, allot some time for yourself so that on a daily basis you work on developing your intellect, so that with your intellect you can control your emotions, and that will only help your relations. That will help you only make more money. That will help you only make more success. Overall, you will also have a work-life balance, plus you will go towards achieving the purpose of life. We will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.